Hi everyone, Heather Williams here with the California AfterSchool Network, and I am joined by Michael Funk from the CDE Expanded Learning Division for a fireside chat, which it's been a while since Michael and I have co-hosted one of these, but as promised, we would bring these back, and so today we are officially bringing them back, and we also have a wonderful special guest, Connie Cha from Fresno Unified. So we'll definitely be introducing her a little bit more in a moment and hearing about some of the great things that Fresno's up to. Um, but first, like we usually do, we're gonna jump into some policy updates. So,
But first,
but first,
what was one of the reasons why we didn't have a fireside chat for so long?
because I had a child.
You had a child.
Yes. So I have been back at work for a while.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
but it's been it's actually been pretty chaotic since I came back to work. There's been a lot of things moving and a lot going on in the policy world, both at the state and federal level. And so we've been trying to keep folks updated in other spaces, whether it's academies or office hours, but we're finally at a good point to offer some hopefully mostly clear policy updates out to the field. And we also know that there's a lot moving. And so wanting to bring on someone from the programmatic side as we talk about the policy side of things, what's the actual like practical implications of those at the district level and the site level. So we'll just jump right in. I'm gonna share my screen because there's a lot of things moving. So let's,
Yeah, we've had several fireside chats scheduled, and then things happen are we going to have 21st century? What's happening with the state budget? I mean, it's the long list. So I think we're in a pretty good place right now. So let's jump in, Heather.
yeah. So the state budget was signed a while ago, but it usually goes through a cleanup process. And so we'll include both the updates for the signed budget that was signed at the end of June, but then also some recent updates as well that'll impact our programs. And so in the budget that was signed back a couple months ago, there was increased funding for ELO-P by $525.5 million. I say that very casually, but that's actually a significant chunk of money, and we'll talk about a little bit more money soon as well. And then the budget also maintained the existing reimbursement rates for ACES and 21st Century. So that's in terms of like the actual dollars that were in the budget. And so you can see just high level, this is originally where we were at for fiscal year 25, 26. And like I said, there's been some slight changes. So this will shift just a bit. Um, but we were at 5.4 billion. Oops, that should say 5.5. I already found a typo. We're now at 5.5 billion. So I'll talk more about this in just a moment, but one of the budget bill cleanup items was to include an additional $81 million in funding for ELO-P. So that brings ELO-P alone to 4.6 billion. And then when you add on our ACES and 21st century dollars, that adds up to $5.5 billion total. And when we link the slide deck, I will make sure it is correct that we are at 5.5 billion. And I'll talk more about why that increase in just a moment. But back when the original budget was signed, in addition to the actual dollars that were outlined in the budget trailer bills and some other legislation outlined some changes to expand and learning as well. And actually, all of these are focused on ELO-P funding. So it outlined some rate changes, and I'll bring up a couple slides in just a moment that go into more detail. But um, prior years, rate one was set at 75% unduplicated pupil population, and with this trailer bill, that dropped down to 55% unduplicated pupil population. So districts at that level now access the higher rate one funding. And then there was also a bill that established rate two or identified that rate two, the intent of rate two was to be no less than $1,575. And I'll talk about that in just a moment as well. Also, really importantly, beginning this fiscal year, the minimum apportionment amount is changing. So it went from $50,000 to $100,000. And that is really good news for our small districts, our rural districts. We have single school districts that were all receiving 50,000 or maybe 60,000. And that was really challenging for them to meet all of the requirements of ELO-P, all the days and hours of offering. And so we were really excited to see that minimum apportionment increasing up to the 100,000. And so that increase you saw in ELO-P a couple slides ago is to cover both of those two increases. That means we need more funding to cover both of those. There was also a couple changes to the offer access requirements in language in Ed Code, and it actually didn't change the requirement. It just adds a little bit of clarity about what does it mean to offer access. And so most of it's the same, but then it adds some, but not limited to, publishing program availability, and enrollment forms. So it just lists out some specific examples to provide some more clarity. And then there's some updates on the audits for the districts that are moving from rate two to rate one this year with the changes. So I'll go into that in more detail as well.
Heather, let me just chime in real quick. I'm realizing that not everybody from that views the Fireside Chats is from California. They have quite a few people who read them from different states. And so this is really basic information, but important to say. ACES, After School Education Safety Program, and 21st Century are grant programs administered by the Expanded Learning Division at the Department of Ed, and they are competitive processes, and the grants are awarded to school sites. ELO-P is an apportionment. That means it's a formula-based grant or a formula-based funding that goes to local educational agencies or LEAs automatically, unless they choose not to run the program, which is also new this year. And part of the formula is based on the percentage of unduplicated students that are in the district, the LEA. Unduplicated students in California means economically disadvantaged, in foster youth, or English learner. And the reason they use the term unduplicated is a student could be experiencing one of those things or three of those things, but they're only counted one time for the count, and that means they're unduplicated. So just try to unpack some of the stuff we're so used to talking about that it might be helpful to bring you others up to speed. So go ahead, Heather.
Thanks, Michael. Yes, we are very jargon heavy. So this is a slide that just talks more in depth about the rates. So again, as Michael was saying, ELO-P is an apportionment, and it's split into two rates based off of the unduplicated pupil percentage. And so this, I'm not going to talk through all of this because some of this is old information, but you'll see the orange arrow. And so when we're looking at fiscal year 25-26, our rate one LEAs remain at that 2,750 that was established in 22-23. So that's the ongoing rate that we see each year. And with the legislature basically did an estimate of what they thought the amount of funding would be needed, and what they thought was a good guess. And when the Department of Education started actually calculating the preliminary rates for fiscal year 25, 26, the funding amount that was available with ELO-P after funding all the rate one LEAs came out to roughly 1280 and some change. And so if you recall on the previous slide, it said the intent was 1575. So there is a bit of a gap there. Um, and intent does not mean it must be, but that is the intent of the legislature. And so with um, SB 105 passing, right, we have an anticipated revised rate of 1,575. And again, there is a lot of math that has to happen behind doors at CDE, where they, are waiting for information from the districts to calculate the exact rate. So the anticipated revised rate with those additional $81 million should be relatively close to 1575, but it'll be updated after October 1st. So after the first, we can give a clear answer on what that is. And you can see in like past years, right, it's 55 cents and that number goes really, really, really long. And so they calculate a very precise number. And so that will be updated soon. October 1st is next week, in case you didn't know that, Michael. It's next week, right around the corner. So the just going back real quick. So rate two used to be, like I said, it went from 55% or went from down from 75% to 55%. So that's a pretty big jump. And so we do have a significant number of LEAs this year that are moving from rate two to rate one. And there was some concerns about that. As you can see on this, there's different requirements. If you, depending on if you're in rate one or rate two, because you are receiving a higher rate in rate one. And so with so many districts moving from rate two to rate one, right, the expectation to provide services at the rate one level, it's a pretty significant jump. And so part of the trailer bill was also to give basically a grace year to ramp up to the full requirements. This is language that's actually in Ed Code. If you read that, you might actually not have any clue what that says. So we basically translated that for you. Here's kind of what it looks like in the middle of translation. But basically, starting this year, LEAs that received funding at rate two in the prior fiscal year and are receiving funding at rate one in the current fiscal year will be held accountable for the audit compliance with the rate two requirements for the current fiscal year. So basically, an example district was rate two last year. Last year, they were held accountable to rate two audit requirements. This year, they move up to rate one. They're still held accountable for this year only at the rate two requirements. But starting next year, they'll be held accountable to the higher rate one requirement. So you have, it is a big jump for a lot of districts in terms of providing to offering and providing access. So there's this year buffer in terms of the compliance for audit requirements. So that's the big thing. And I'll have Michael jump in a few minutes to add some additional context. But another big thing that's happening this year is attendance recovery. Lots of big changes this year. So we've been talking about attendance recovery for a while now, and it's actually happening this year. And so there's a lot of different resources out. We actually had a whole ELO-P Academy in the spring around attendance recovery at our Expanded Learning Academy. Just last week, we talked a little bit about some folks that are starting to implement attendance recovery, and then there's also partners who are starting to release additional resources to provide support as well. So you can go to this link and access all of those resources. They're organized in one spot for you. And we'll likely have future academies focusing on this topic because it is a hot topic. One thing I'm going to mention here, because I've been hearing this recently, folks are like, yeah, we're going to pilot something in the summer. I will note the requirement for attendance recovery is that if you offer it in one term, you must offer it in all terms. And so if you offer it in the fall, you have to offer it in the spring. If you don't have to offer it in the summer, but if you do offer it in the summer, that means you also have to offer it in the fall and spring. Or if you're on trimester or quarter system, right, like whatever the term is, you have to offer it in each of those terms. And so if you haven't started yet. Fall is, quickly coming to a close. So you can't suddenly offer it in spring for the first time because then you would be out of compliance with that requirement. You can certainly start to think about it and build out the structure, but you would want to be careful that you don't start your pilot until July 1 in the new fiscal year so you can um, make sure you don't get a ding there. And then last slide, and I'll turn it back over to Michael just to add some additional context. I mentioned this earlier. We just had our first two fall academies, and so a lot of good content in those. The recordings, the slides, all of that content is up on the CAN website already, so you can go back and watch more updates about audits and different topics. So definitely recommend that. And then we have two more coming up next week, and so if you are not already signed up and interested in those, I would highly recommend signing up for those. And so I think that's the bulk of my policy updates. But Michael, what else do you want to add on? And do you want the slides up or do you want me to pull them down?
You can take it down.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. Um, that's a lot of information, but there's a lot of information to know. And of course, the academies, the expanded learning office hours that we co-host with CAN, and great places for dialogue, conversation to jump into the nuanced type discussions. Um, I was going to talk a bit about ELO-P audit findings because the audit came in for the first year, but I think for the sake of time, just note that there were a lot of them, and the requirements to meet the audit for ELO-P are more stringent than most other parts of K-12 education. We can talk more about that. I won't give those examples right now, but just know that our system of support for expanded learning, our EXLD staff, expanded learning division staff, the county offices, the statewide partners, we're gearing up to launch into a very targeted year of support for any district or charter that might have had a finding. And there will be a critical support list, and it's nothing to be anxious about. It is not like coming to monitor, review. It is coming to help. How can we support you, connect you? And one of the things I often do to connect an LEA that would like some help is introduce them to Connie Cha. And Connie, the number of districts moving from rate two to rate one is so significant. And we're seeing interesting things emerge. We're seeing, hearing of some districts that, well, now we're supposed to offer and provide access to all students, not just unduplicated. And some are struggling with, there are some districts that are actually unduplicated students aren't getting in now. And non-unduplicated students are in the program. So there's a lot to sort out and work through. But the challenge of offering to unduplicated students to all students is significant. And just for all of those that are watching, 2 days ago, Connie was at a meeting we were hosting, which is our Research and Evaluation Strategy Committee for Expanded Learning, working on some very exciting things for down the road. And over lunch, just chatting with Connie, and she just dropped a few things that were quite amazing to me. The progress that they've made in the last year of really that Fresno Unified School District always has high quality. And the catalog, literally a catalog of offerings for their summer and winter programming is like nothing I've ever seen. These kids are getting the best, the best opportunities that money can buy, except they're free. And Connie, you shared a couple days ago that last year you had something like 3,500 students enrolled, which is significant. And this year you have 7,000. You said you had a waiting list. That waiting list is now at zero. How did you do that? And where did you find the staff to do that? How did you train all the staff to do that? Tell us.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. We are so excited to have this opportunity. And I say we, even though I'm the only one here, we meaning Fresno Unified Expanded Learning specifically. We're so excited to be able to have a chance to share. So we knew that our students need the services, our family, our communities need the out of school time service, specifically. After school, and then also the programming that we offer during winter and summer. And so knowing that we knew we couldn't do it all in-house. It couldn't all just be within the walls of Fresno Unified as a LEA. We knew we needed to count and call out for new ways to go about strategizing and thinking outside the box, outside the norm. And so some of the strategies that we tried, and it's working to have proven results, is definitely leaning into our community organizations, bringing them on as true partners in this work. And through that connection with community-based organizations, they are also able to access additional workforce that they are connected with to bring in additional employees through their end as a community-based employee to help provide direct services to our students in Fresno Unified. In addition to that, we in the expanded learning department in Fresno Unified, we are boots on the ground, being visible at our local community and four-year college and universities, building those partnerships with the presidents and or chancellors and deans of the local colleges to be able to partake in any kind of event that they have where we can be in space talking to our young college students and trying to get them to come on board to help provide some workforce support through our after school program needs. That has been something that has really changed the trajectory of our workforce within expanded learning. We have been able to put individuals at the programs at all of our school sites. We are a district of 100 schools. So at 100 school sites, we have a mixture of Fresno Unified employees in after-school paraprofessional positions, and they work side by side with community based organization employees that our community-based organizations have put on our campuses. And so that has afforded us the ability to open up the 25-26 after school program this year in Fresno Unified, where essentially every child that wants access to after school was afforded access. And I wanted to just add this little extra bit, if little Connie Cha, she's back, Michael, if little Connie Cha wants access and she receives a one-on-one para support during the regular day based off of her IEP, we do everything that we can to work closely with our special education department to ensure that there is a para to support little Connie Cha this in similar way during out of school time hours, whether it's after school or during our winter or summer programming, so that she is going to receive the level of support to help her get a meaningful experience during out of school time.
So, Connie, I'm going to ask you some other questions to touch on some of the aspects of your staff development. But to the point you just made, so many people are expressing that this is what they want to do. They want to provide support for kids with special needs or kids that have an IEP, kids with disabilities. Um, but they're not getting the cooperation that they need to be able to do that. And it's not to disparage anybody in the system, but um, our kids with special needs have there's still a debate among some as to whether they should have that support and have access to expanded learning and whether that's as important as the instructional day. I'm just curious, how long did it take for you to get that kind of partnership and collaboration, and what were some of the challenges and some of the ways that you overcame them?
Great question, Michael. Um, That is a common question that I get from different LEAs and or charters up and down our state of California. And I will be very transparent and honest. It did not happen overnight. It requires a lot of collaboration and clarity and coherence within your own system. So when I speak to and go back down memory lane of the challenges that we have had to overcome, it really meant that um, we needed to be clear and aligned, and there had to be coherence within Fresno Unified. And what that really entails is me from expanded learning in Fresno Unified having the honest dialogue with the special education department and any other decision makers and stakeholders to help them understand that when we say we're going to give access to all students, it also includes all the little Connie Chas who are on an IEP, who receive special education services. They are also part of it when we say all students. And so helping really everybody internally inside our own system understand the importance of really standing true behind the word access to all for all students. That once there was clarity and coherence within your system, and every LEA is different, there's no two that are alike based on the conversations I have had with other expanded learning leaders throughout our state. What I do recommend is that the conversations need to start, and there has to be true, honest conversation about why all students need to have access and why additional specialized paraprofessional support are needed during out of school type programming to help support. Because if it's good for little Connie Cha, with getting the extra para support during the regular day, when she participates in the out of school time programming, such as after school, summer, and winter program, it's also good for her there. And so once there is clarity and coherence and alignment within your own system, then the rest pretty much will fall into place. You will have the employees who will say, count me in. How do I be part of this? I already support Little Connie Child during the regular school year or the regular school day. I am interested in providing additional support. And at first, I will be very honest, Michael and Heather, that we were a little bit unsure whether or not we would get enough of the paraprofessionals leaning in, saying they wanted to be part of this as well. But you never know until you try, and that is one of the things that I always encourage other LEA leaders is, hey, just because it hasn't been asked or done or discussed within your internal organization does not mean that it's not possible. You have to be unapologetic, and you have to be courageous in asking, hey, these are the needs that we haven't tapped into, and this is a gap, and being very truthful about the gaps that exist. If out of school time is something that the families and the students need, then it needs to be also one of the priorities when a LEA or a charter makes decisions on where they're going to allocate the support and where they're going to help make sure that they alleviate all of the challenges that may or the barriers that exist so that new and innovative ways can go into place in order to help provide the supports, because we want our students to have the best and highest quality of experience and supports during out of school time, just like how we would never turn our backs to those kind of needs during the regular school day. And so that is part of, what took place early on and frequently, many times. I, along with my team in the expanded learning department, Fresno Unified, Michael and Heather, we felt like we were in a hamster wheel, constantly repeating the same thing, just having the same conversations, sometimes with the same stakeholders over and over in order to ensure clarity and coherence. But once you reach that level of clarity and coherence, then there's no asking, no wondering, no ponderings as to whether or not additional support is needed for our students who receive special education services during the regular day, why that should not be afforded during out of school time.
So, Connie, one of the things I think everybody would assume is you can't get to that level of coherence and engagement and that level of collaborative partnerships without leadership being solidly behind this vision. And we've had your former superintendent, Bob Nelson, on the Fireside Chat with you before. And Bob's a dear friend, clearly a crystal clear vision and passion for what really being student-centered means with budget decisions and staffing positions and what it means to lead from a student-centered perspective. And I know your current superintendent is also uh, as supportive, and that's critical. Heather, I'm wondering when we post this, if you could link to the other fireside chat because Bob tells his story and that tells a bit more of the background about how that kind of collaboration and partnership was forged. Just sake of time, one more question, and then Heather will ask you something more broadly to give you a chance to close with whatever you'd like to say. But one of the things I asked you a couple of days ago was, okay, how did you train all these staff? What's how do you ensure high quality staff? Because that's the factor that is most determinant of whether a program is high quality. And then you shared with me some very specifics. So please share with us what that was.
Yes, so whether you are a Fresno Unified employee or you are an employee providing services to Fresno Unified students through a community-based organization, they all receive the same trainings and professional development that we provide through Fresno Unified. So it doesn't matter which organization you're affiliated with. If you are providing student services to students through expanded learning, then you are going through all of the necessary trainings. And then what we also do is we continue to provide supports to our after school staff through our partnerships, again, partnerships, clarity, and coherence throughout our system with our teacher development department. They also provide support by visiting our sites, our programs, and we all know it's not a secret that there's a teacher and educator shortage, not just statewide, but nationwide. And so, in helping ensure that we connect our community partner employees to our teacher pipeline in our district and have them have the same access and exposure to the professional development, that also makes a huge difference in ensuring that all staff in out of school time programming in Fresno Unified minimally have the same access to baseline professional development to help them build their capacity to best provide the highest level of quality of service to our kids.
Well, in a short amount of time, you managed to cover quite a few topics. So thank you for the insight you have shared. And I think, well, one thing to note before I ask you this last question, right? You mentioned feeling like you've been on the hamster wheel, and I think Michael and I have been there before. I feel like we've been on the hamster wheel. But the importance of, right, like sometimes we hear like, yeah, I asked somebody the question, and it's not, a lot of times these are not one-off conversations. It's the the consistency and the dedication to continue to have those conversations and build the coherency that doesn't just happen in one moment. That takes a lot of dedicated work. So really appreciate your dedication to doing that work. And as folks, right, I think especially of these all these districts that are going from rate two to rate one, for some, we heard from some of them this, we're not sure we want the additional money. That feels like a daunting task. And so you did in a year a very daunting task. So as these districts are kind of taking on that challenge, and some of them are very excited about it, and some of them are, excited to serve more students, but still have that hesitation. So I guess what's one piece of advice to kind of help them just get going? Because I can imagine like the sheer scale of it might make it challenging to even just take that first step. So what would you recommend to them as they're jumping into this journey?
I would when I reflect back and thinking what would be a piece of advice that I would want to give to someone else if they were going through the early stages of what I, along with my team back at Fresno Unified, went through. I think you just have to be courageous and recognize where the needs are and don't be afraid to ask and be, and I mentioned this earlier, be unapologetic about what you are pushing for, because we as adult leaders sometimes we can be very set in our own ways, having a set mindset. And expanded learning, one of the beauty about expanded learning is that nothing is set. Everything's always moving and changing and growing because we are providing services that's going to be distinct and specific to serving the needs of our students and our families. And so for any leader who is going, okay, I get it, like this, I have to push for change, and change is never going to be easy. They have to be courageous, be unapologetic, and just make sure that for them, front and center, they put the needs of what their families and their students need for out of school time programming. No LEA that has reached out, Heather, Michael, when it's when I share with them, they pause for a second and regularly they will say, you know what, you're right. It's the fixed mindset. It's the, well, we've never done it that way before, or we've never had to do that before. And so helping them understand. And you have to be courageous and you have to be okay with the uncomfortable. And as leaders, that is one of the things, a part of the gig that we all signed up for as leaders. And so they have to be courageous because it will get uncomfortable. It will get challenging. It may sometimes even feel like, oh gosh, I don't think I'm making any gains here with what I'm pushing for our systemic change to happen within my own organization. But you cannot give up because our students and our families, regardless of what corner of our state that an LEA or a charter is serving, they need these programs. And we as leaders leading this work in each of our respective organization, we have an obligation. And so when I remind LEA leaders that this is our calling, this is what we are here to do, it really helps put things into perspective for them. And then I usually, hear back from any LEAs that reaches out to me, and they always say, thank you so much, because that every time I feel like I'm hitting a wall and not gaining any ground, I remember what you said, Connie, that I have to be courageous. I have to be okay with the uncomfortable because we cannot be okay with just settling for the fixed mindset. And so that is typically what I would tell anybody and everybody, because that is what I experienced myself along with my team at Fresno Unified. And you just have to just keep pushing for what needs to be done. And it's not easy, but the outcomes and the dividends, it's priceless.
Well, thank you so much, Connie, for joining us today and chatting with us and sharing some of what you all have been working on. And a lot of appreciation to you and your team. And I know you gave your team a big shout out when we were having lunch with you the other day, but I'll say a big thank you to them as well. You all are doing a really fantastic job. And we always love to hear what you're up to. So thanks for joining us. And Michael, I'll turn it over to you for closing words.
Yeah, well, Connie, and to you and your team, thank you for leading with love. This is what love looks like in action. It's these 7,000 kids not only need, but they deserve this opportunity. They deserve the love that you're putting into action. And maybe if you're watching, you're feeling a bit challenged or a bit anxious. Um, but you know what? As a leader in expanded learning, you deserve love and the opportunity to see this vision realized. I'm sure that many days it's hard, Connie, but I'm sure that the deep level of satisfaction and pride and purpose resonates through your veins and is energized and supercharged because of the commitment you made and the commitment to see it through. So let's all lead with love and give ourselves and our kids what we deserve. Thank you. See you next time.
Thank you.